Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another week. Before I'm going to get into the good stuff, don't forget that listening to us isn't the only way to interact with NDA. You can follow us on all our socials. There you can chat to each other about episodes. You can watch us on YouTube. You can give us a 5-star rating, obviously. The list goes on. But we do have a really, really good episode for you today. It's a topic that came up a lot during season 1, and that topic is ageism. Broadly speaking, we're going to be asking, is the industry ageist? If it is, then why? What impact is that having on us all? It's one of the isms that doesn't get as much airtime, which is bizarre because it's something that happens to us all. So I've got the very best guests today. We're going to get right under the skin of it. They won't mind me saying they've both been in the industry long enough to bring a lot of wisdom and experience to the conversation. Not to mention they're both very honest, which we love to see here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask them to say how old they are, because that's a new addition to the intro, but it feels really relevant today. So, Jane, do you want to introduce yourself and kick us off?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jane Evans. I'm 61, 62 in July, and have absolutely no problem saying my age because I'm at level 61, just about to get to level 62. And I think we need to really sort of reframe how we look at life. That's my whole mission at the moment. So I run the Uninvisibility Project, which basically is about unleashing the power of midlife women. So we've written the book Invisible to Invaluable, created the Visible Start course, which gets women employed, and basically I'm out there being very gobby about how amazing midlife women are.
Brilliant, thank you. And Michael?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Johnson. I've been in the business for about 4 decades, which puts me in my very, very, very late 50s, and about to hit a significant birthday, so do the maths. I had 8 jobs in 8 years in my first decade, got fired 3 times, and then eventually started my own company, Johnson Banks, when I became essentially unemployable at 28, and here I am 32 years later.
Awesome. Like I said, very qualified. I'm Katie Cadwell, you know me by now, creative director at Lucky Dip and your host. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the grand age of 31, and that is our cue to get into it. So I'm going to kick off with some statistics on the industry at large. So in the United Kingdom, the IPA census found that the average age of employees in the creative agencies was as low as 34, with only 6% being over 50. By contrast, individuals over 50 make up 31% of the workforce in the UK. So I think we'll kick off with talking about where do they go, why do they disappear, and break down some of the really kind of specific barriers and stigmas and talk about each one. So I want to come out the gate quite strong. The general perception that you become irrelevant, not relevant anymore, which is harsh to say, but I just wanted to kick us off there and get your thoughts on it. So, Jane, what do you think? Why is there this perception that you become irrelevant?
I can't speak for the male experience, but from the female experience, what people don't realise is our generation of women were the first generation of women with rights in the workplace. So we're not just dealing with a societal attitude that's been going on for centuries. And so women like us have never existed before. We haven't been in the workforce. We didn't have the right to be there. So, previously, at the age of 50 and you were going to retire at 60, we were gone. We were out of society. We had no further use. So we've got a world that actually doesn't realise that this is, you're actually seeing a whole new group of people that the world has never seen before.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think from my perspective in the design world, there's definitely a case where do the 50-something designers go? And I don't mean that as it's just an open question really, because it is interesting the way that people just drift out of the business. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly what happens, actually. People seem to lose their interest in the business, or they don't necessarily want to keep climbing up the ladder, or they don't want to be one of those people who ends up at the higher echelons of a huge holding company. And bit by bit, they seem to drift out of the business. And it is odd, and it has been like this way for a while. And I did some little bit of research looking back at this, and a lot of the people, especially that I knew in the advertising business 20 years ago, and I was very close to the ad world, nearly all of them are not in that anymore, or they're a consultant, or they're doing something completely different. Slightly different in design, but even so, unless you're a principal of a design company, in which there are 50-something people still around, you don't get many 50-something senior designers in the business, and it's a very odd thing, really. Where do they all go? I do ask myself, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well, I think that there are a lot of theories, right, as to why this happens. I guess one that I think is interesting, and I'd love to get your points of view on, is this idea of the understanding and the evolution of technology, and people of a certain age being able to, it sounds really patronising as I'm saying it, so I do apologise, but being able to kind of keep up with it. I'm trying to be blunt because I'm trying to kind of be the voice of the stigma. So I've got really interesting
31-year-old, you mean?
Yeah, I know, right, you could blame it on me. So I just want to read out something from Brett Allen, who works in digital marketing. Published a really interesting article on LinkedIn called Ageism in the Digital Marketing Industry. And this was following a call he had with a recruiter when he was told he's too old to understand TikTok. And he says, I've always tried to be on the edge of emerging MarTech. I started using Google Ads as soon as it was launched, and the same with most digital channels, including TikTok. I even made Facebook work as a marketing platform before it was allowed. I love being hands-on and take to most tech like a kid to a shiny new toy. Yes, they're fun for a while, but like most toys, they're eventually discarded. Everyone loves a new fad. More recent systems will replace TikTok and other social platforms, and I'll be there waiting. Great marketers improve with age. Experience gives you a broader awareness of what it is to be human in a digital world. With life experiences, you become more, in most cases, empathetic. Digital marketing requires a holistic approach that interweaves with consumers' daily lives. So I think we can apply that to all creative industries, and it's essentially the emerging technology. And why is there this perception that people that are slightly older don't try to keep up with it?
I can say I run a society, the Visible Society. We've got 1,100 women in it, and we're all talking AI. It's absolutely top of mind. We're all absolutely furious that we can't find ourselves or create an image of ourselves in Mid-Journey and all of these things because we're completely missing from it. And for me, I mean, I launched Microsoft Word version 1 in 1983, which was, having to explain what word processing was and what software was and what computers were at a time when people couldn't even understand why on earth they'd want one of them. And I've been there through every single iteration of technology. So why on earth anybody would think that I wouldn't be just as interested in, AI and blockchain as I was in fax machines and mobile phones is it's actually insulting.
Yeah. Michael, what do you have to say back to that kind of theory that there's a less appetite, I suppose, to understand and take on new technology?
Well, I think there's, as people get older, it gets more difficult for them sometimes to take on technology. So my 89-year-old mother is struggling with her online banking app, and that's true. Mind you, gosh, when Jane and I are 89, and Katie, you are 59 or something, can't do the maths. Sorry. It is a struggle really to keep up with some of the technology. Not so much for me, but my world, my branding world, is currently caught in a sort of whizzing, spinning place. And the language of the fintech marketeer and the fizzy drinks and the trainers and this, that and the other is kind of obsessed with a particular way of looking and feeling at the moment. And you could see how a 32-year-old marketing exec would want to entrust their work with a 32-year-old designer. And I'm cognizant of that, and that does happen, yeah. And I might sometimes. I used to say that we would lose a job once or twice a year because we weren't a huge company. I'm starting to think that we might lose 1 or 2 jobs a year now because we are deemed to be a more mature company than someone wants. So I think there might be something in it, you know. I'm not denigrating any of the platforms, obviously, but there is something interesting about the fact that a 33-year-old wants a 33-year-old to do the work for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happens, you know. I'm not pretending it doesn't happen, really. Now, obviously, I'm sure we will talk today about the fact that as you get older, you get more experience, and as you've done a job X times, then you have the ability to do it better. But you can understand that kind of inherent ageism, if you like, in that selection process.
Is it to do with audience, do you think?
Yeah.
So it's kind of saying that you have to be a certain, and I'm not saying I agree with this at all. I've worked on a skateboarding brand and never stepped on a skateboard in my life. And I think there's a similar argument there. But do you have to be the age of your audience? And is that like this obsession with trending on TikTok means that the people working on the job have to be excessive TikTok users?
I mean, I guess there used to be that thing. I mean, the advertising industry has always been, it's seemingly populated by 25, 30 to 35-year-old chasing that demographic, hasn't there? Which is, of course, is the cliche. And when one gets out of that demographic and one gets older as a creative or older as a target market, then it gets more interesting. I think Jane's work is really interesting because it's saying, well, there's this boomer audience that is coming in that's just not being marketed to.
Well, it's absolutely ridiculous because, you know, midlife women 45 plus, buy 50.3% of everything. And here you are saying that 6% of people in advertising agencies are over 50 and they haven't got the guts to break that down by gender, because I can guarantee you that those 6% are the old white guys at the top.
Yeah, so arguably the decision makers rather than the people actually kind of making the work. So there is definitely this idea that you have to be the audience to relate to the audience, right?
Look, I don't agree with that. I made my career on beer and I've never touched the stuff. I hate it. So, you know, and, you know, so I don't agree with that. However, when there is an audience that has never been spoken to, that is not represented within advertising agencies, marketing departments, I think it's sheer bloody lunacy that anybody even tries to talk to us. Frankly, you know, I've been campaigning for 5 years now. I still have not seen anything that I could, to the top of my head, go, this has been a great representation for us, or this has been a great piece of communication to us. All I see is people observing us, and all I see is people creating these sort of ads for their mum. And it was like, we're not your mum, we're your crazy aunts. And, you know, it was like, and again, it was like, if you went and asked my daughters to describe me, and then went and asked my best friend to go and describe me, I can guarantee you which would be the most fun conversation. So, you know, it's like, you know, to me it's madness that the largest, most powerful consumer group on this planet is completely and utterly ignored and misrepresented and unrepresented in the people that are creating the work. And, you know, I still, after 5 years of campaigning, just can't believe that the penny is still not dropping.
But I'm presuming, though, because as the boomer demographic, and I'm the last year of boomer, actually. And so, Jane, you're just at the tail end of it, too.
We're the punk generation.
Yeah, okay.
The tail end.
Okay, well, I'll take that. Yeah, thank you. New wave, maybe, but anyway. As this demographic, which has got cash, as discussed, and maybe not for today, moves into its 60s, 70s, and 80s, there's a big wad of cash there that is moving into the period of its life where it will spend. And to Jane's point, it is amazing that thus far that hasn't been, that it's a bit like the advertising and marketing community have just kind of got blinkers on or something, or can't see it. However, money talks, yeah. So as that demographic moves, that bulge moves across. I think it's going to be very interesting, actually, because I think you'll start to see. Well, I hope we'll start to see things change a little. I did a pitch to one of the, I think it was Age Concern or one of those a few years ago, and I remember being astounded that when I did some Google image searches into the age, the relative age of this market, it was incredible. To Jane's point about everyone my age and older, it seems to be on a cruise, pointing, arm around partner, pointing to something, on the horizon. I had a picture I took of a friend of mine who was 59 at the time, and she was at a party with her mum, and I think her mum was something nearly 30 years older. Yeah, so you had 59 and 79. I can't do the maths. I think she was 20 years older. Anyway, 59 and 79, and in advertising terms, they were the same. Yeah, but you couldn't have picked two more different people and two more different attitudes to the world. The 59-year-old had an utterly different attitude to the 79-year-old because, by definition, they were separated by a generation. But yes, in marketing and demographic terms, you hit 55 and you become this massive grey market.
45 for women.
Yeah, fair.
45
fair.
For women.
Yeah.
And again, this is the thing that people just aren't getting their freaking heads around, and it blows my mind. Our generation, the boomers, we're going to live till we're 90 or 100. If we're healthy, we're going to live till we're 120. You youngsters are going to have a lifespan of 120 years old. And it was like, and that's without taking into consideration the technological advances in health that are coming. So, we're already at a place where we should be designing the 100-year life. And the thing is that and nobody seems to be realizing that we've been gifted with an extra 20 years of life. And it's not tacked on at the end, it's put in at the middle. And so, this image, and again, we go back to images. I mean, I'm on a crusade with freaking Midjourney at the moment, because you put in for a 50-year-old woman, you get an 80-year-old woman. You put in for a 40-year-old woman, you get a 60-year-old woman. And it's not AI's fault. It is the fact that we haven't been shown in the media, so there's no models to take it off. And it was like, if we don't make this change now, and for people to realise, we're the Spice Girls, not the Golden Girls. Yeah. And again, it's like people are using the old-fashioned stereotypes of what 60 plus was, and what 50 plus was, what 45 plus was. Again, it was like, I mean, we all joke that we say to women, would you have ever worn any of your mother's clothes? And we're like, oh my God, never in a million years, wouldn't have dreamt of it, never. Whereas, I have to fight to get my clothes back off my daughters because they're constantly raiding my wardrobe. So, the attitude, we are younger. We are 20 years younger than our parents were at our age. And we've got to start carving out, instead of it being young and old, it's young, middle and old. And if we start realizing that, as we always say, the middle's the best bits, where the jam is, and again, the thing I find with younger women is they're always they're under so much time pressure. It was like they've got to get the right university course, they've then got to get the right job, they've got to then find the right partner, get as high up the corporate ladder as they possibly can before they can have a family and feel as though they can have a break. Then they rushed back because they don't want to lose their place on the corporate ladder. And I said, and I'm really sorry, ladies, but why are you doing all of this? Because by the time your kids are teenagers, you're going to have lost your job and your career anyway. Now, if younger women could start to see, well, actually, hold on, if we can see women at 45 picking up their careers again and absolutely flying, it gives me so much space. It actually allows me to plateau my career. And, up until this point, careers have been designed around a man's biology. And I think we need to actually start, really redesigning careers for a woman's biology, because men are going to gain out of this greatly. If we can have we're going to have longer careers. We're going to have to work until we're 70 years old, whether we like it or not. So, rather than it being 70 miles and 270 at 70 miles an hour in a straight line up. Why can't we should be designing more meandering careers that allow us to have more satisfying lives too.
Yeah, I think that it's very apparent that there is an audience for this demographic, right? And there's a lot of power there, and there's a lot of untapped potential. But that doesn't answer the question of where all the midlife creatives go. It answers the question of why we need them, and that there is a great hole in our industry. So a couple of the suggestions we've had from listeners, and I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this, is that typically people just burn out. They lose the enthusiasm, they lose their energy, they just sort of ebb away. People stepping out of the industry because either they don't feel like there's a space for them, or they're just tired. It can be a pretty brutal space at times. I'm only 30 and I'm quite tired. Sometimes I dream of, opening a cafe. Or that you get too old, too wise, too experienced to be doing the kind of grunt work, and you get pushed into a kind of consulting or mentoring role. So where do you think people are going, and why do you think that midlife or elder creatives are being pushed out?
Well,
from my experience of the women the people that I started my career with, I mean, when I was having my kids, there was no maternity leave, there was no childcare, there was you could not carry on a high-profile creative career and have children. So most of the women of my era basically went freelance. Unfortunately, again, the whole lens of the industry was once you went freelance, that meant you weren't good enough for a full-time gig. And that was very much the attitude, because that's what men did. If they got tired or lost interest, or just lost too many jobs and couldn't get another one, they went freelance. Whereas women went freelance so that they could raise their kids, or So I think, and again, I look at all of, my creative friends around the world. We ran small little cottage industries. We went and we worked with smaller clients. The problem is again, with Fiverr and now AI coming in and templated websites and things like that. We used to be able to make quite a nice living just with lots of little small clients, and didn't really need to sort of get back into the industry. But I think now that has completely died. You can't make a living from small itsy bitsy cottage kitchen table design and advertising businesses anymore. So, and there, until we did Visible Start, there was actually no way back. And, there was lots of people doing creative returners courses, but they were really just looking for women in their 30s that are coming back from having a baby, rather than women in their 50s that were coming back from, a divorce or a dying parent, or, all of the things that can, again, when I see women that have lost their careers, it's almost never been about the job or their ability to do the job. It's been caring for an aging parent, children with special needs, teenagers freaking out. It's like the stories just go on and on. And again, one of the things that I think we've very successfully done is when we started in 2019, every single woman over the age of 40, when the next redundancy round was at the point of going, well, it's going to be me. It was just so ingrained in the culture that the next round of redundancies, the women over 40 go. And I think we've stopped that now for the previous generations, but we've got really valuable generations above that we need to bring back.
Yeah.
I mean, to the question, Katie, questions that you posed. I mean, the question of burnout is an interesting one, and I can't speak to Jane's topic because I'm clearly the wrong gender for that. But I can speak to burnout because I think that there are, and I know we talked about this before, Katie, but I think there are two key stages to burnout. One is the kind of 30-something burnout, which I see quite a lot, actually, which is with designers, in my business at least, 10 years in are kind of questioning, ooh, okay, wow, this is tough. Do I want to keep doing that? I'm not sure if burnout's the right phrase, really, because that implies you've lost your ideas. It's more to do with, crikey, do I want to keep doing this? And there is unquestionably something that happens later where someone feels like they're on the little mouse on the wheel that's thinking that, gosh, I'm still doing this. Yeah. So I don't think burnout really is the right phrase. It's more to do with the kind of the velocity of the industry is tough. Yeah, it is. I used to have this phrase actually that I thought I'd share with you. I was telling Dave Dye, who does this famous podcast, that I used to have a rule with myself that I had to have one good idea a week. And when you added up, that was 52 good ideas a year. And that started to become quite tough when I got into my 40s, I think. But actually, if you think about it, if a design company like mine, let's say we have 15 big projects a year and we want to do 3 good ideas for each project, that's 45 a year. So that's quite a lot of idea generation. And if you want to be doing good ideas, then it is quite tough. And some people do find that tough. And I can't say for men or for women or for both. And so that is a factor. Your other question, or the other question you posed about being too old and too wise, well, I think that plays 2 ways actually, because you can have done something too much. You can have done a project too many times. I think the American designer T-Ball Coleman had this rule which he called the 3 times rule, which is you do the same project 3 times and then you stop. Because actually, after you've done it 3 times, you know enough about beer, or you know enough about branding your university. And I always thought that was a really good rule, which is you kind of, you've got to try and keep your brain alive, actually, by trying to keep new ideas and new briefs coming in. And I think if you are able to keep up with the idea generation, for good or for bad, and if you keep having to do the same project, you can understand why people might want to move away and move into consultancy or I don't know, start that cafe that you talked about, Katie, or maybe along the line in the 20-year journey you found that you've got a real interest and a skill in something you've learned about and you want to now do that project in the 3rd stage of your life. And you do see people doing that, going off into product or product development or service development, yeah.
No, it's interesting, and I think it's definitely no one size fits all as to why there is this huge gap. But I think there is a question over what can we be doing to better keep people in the industry. And there's not one answer for that because there are so many reasons that people are kind of falling out, I suppose. I might just move us on to something slightly more positive. But before I do that, one more. It's not a negative point, but I liked this voice note. This is from a woman called Belinda Hubble. And we had a few people anonymously say that as you get older, you're just not as cool. And you're not perceived to be as cool. And everyone wants to work with the latest, coolest, hippest, probably most arrogant creative director. So Belinda sent us in a voice note I wanted to play to you both.
Is ageism in the creative industry linked to beauty and perceived coolness? So as creatives, we're intrinsically attracted to beautiful things. So how does this relate when we talk about age? I think this is particularly relevant for women when we're talking about creating families and our getting older, changing body shapes, potential perceptions around being mumsy. How is that? How does that impact that? I mean, obviously, creative men walk a very different path. They, in their 20s, they can, they have the cap, they have the beard if they want, they can wear their black T-shirt. Nothing really changes that much as they get older. They can do that 20, 30, 40 years later. Whereas I think women go through such a shift as they get older. And I'm curious to know how that link might be with beauty and age as well.
Yeah, just thought that was quite a different point of view. And the only thing I would counter with that is I do think that there I've seen a few memes recently of creative directors in their 60s wearing the little tiny beanie and trying to be kind of like down with the kids. I think there is an element on men too, that it's like becomes hard to stay kind of cool. Do you both feel that pressure that you need to kind of stay cool in the eyes of the industry?
I find people find me cooler than when I was in my 30s now. But I do. When we were writing our book, there was somebody told me something which just had me absolutely agog, and it was like, Jane, the reason why there aren't older people in the creative departments is because you remind the younger people of their mortality, and it was like. I was like, oh, right, okay, so because we're here, they're going to get old. And, my response to that is to be as outrageously and disgracefully old as possible. So, I'm so with Cindy Gallop that I am at the point where I've got absolutely zero fucks left to give. Not one, none. I don't care what you think I look like. I don't care what you think I sound like. I really don't care what your opinion is of me. I know who I am. I'm really happy of who I am. But again, I sound like a broken record. We need to see these images. We need to see images of cool midlife women and cool midlife men. It's like, again, there's all these stereotypes of who we are. But actually, in reality, when anybody spends any time with us, they're like, wow, there's so much to you. Again, when we started the Visible Start course with Mediacom, they had 200 people that were volunteering to work with these women. And they got to the end of the course, and every single one of them said, we learnt more from them than we taught them. And it's almost like, wow, we were actually really amazed at how cool you all are. And it's almost like this real surprise when they spend time with us. And I will preface this with, I'm sorry, but this is very much a white thing. I think, other cultures, particularly Black culture, crazy cool old aunties are everybody wants to be the aunties are revered, loved, and absolutely allowed to be themselves 100%. So I'm really for for midlife women and men to just be outrageously yourself, because you're no longer defined by the classical views of beauty. So create what your version of beauty is. Wear the sort of clothes that you want to wear that expresses who. And I think it's a time for you to express who you are on the inside, rather than trying to sort of look at the way the world expects you to look.
Yeah. Michael, do you feel like you need to put on a white t-shirt and buy some New Balance still? Yeah.
I'm clearly that guy. Sorry, for the audio, I am wearing a white t-shirt, just in case you're wondering why the last.
Well, so am I, though, so we're allowed to be a little bit cliche.
Yeah, so, there's no doubt that I'm not trying to do record covers anymore. I'm not trying to do rave leaflets and stuff like that. As you get older, your age suits certain types of work. Yeah. And there's no doubt that you've got to be honest with yourself about that. And I kind of don't mind that. As one becomes, open quotes, a bit more establishment, it does bring some benefits, because you then are able to attract the kind of, open quotes, establishment clients that you couldn't get when I was 28. Yeah, there's no way a big company is going to give you a massive rebrand if you're 27 and the chairman's 63. It's just not going to happen. They're going to turn to the marketing director and say, look, this kid, it might happen, but it's a long shot. So there are benefits of aging, but the flip side is that you can't pretend. I think it's a bit naive to pretend that you can still be the cool kid on the block. There's something good about aging gracefully. Interesting, I was just talking to the designers before I came on the show, and I was saying that we did a project a couple of years ago for a fake meat brand called This, which I think a lot of listeners might know. It's a big deal here in the UK, and is now a 25-30 million brand called This Isn't Meat. And mainly because the founder, who of course is in his late 20s, early 30s, loved a bit of traditional identity work that we'd done. But because we did this branding and it's been successful, we do get a regular regular inquiries from 30-something startups, and those meetings go only two ways. Yeah, they either go, okay, he's older but he's cool, or they go, he's like my dad. Yeah, why would I want to work with my dad? You know, and you can sort of see it in their eyes, and I'm sort of okay about that. But I'm being honest here. There are moments where you think, oh no, this is just not going to work at all. You know, because they, you know, I mean, if you were a 32-year-old startup, you probably wouldn't want to work with your dad. So I kind of get it. You know, it's self-selective in a way.
You see, I think that's. I think that, you know, we've got to start normalising multi-generational work. I think, you know, the idea that anybody should be working with people that are like them is exactly what's got us in this shit in the first place.
I don't disagree. I'm just being honest about
it. And
you
I'm
know,
sorry, but, you know, it was like being complicit. You know, again, as a woman, I'm sort of at the point where it was like, well, I've been through all the fucking sexism bullshit. It was like, you know, add the ageism bullshit to the top of it. You know, make that a black woman my age and she's add the fucking racism to it. I mean, we're at the point of absolute rage now.
Yeah. If I play the rage card in the next meeting with a startup, I could try. You know.
Absolutely.
If you don't give me this project, I'm going to absolutely lose it.
But I think the thing is it's easy to carry, you know, everybody's sort of like young and old and all of this. But, you know, what we really should be encouraging is teams working to, you know, multi-generational teams. We shouldn't have this separation. And, you know, again, if you look on TikTok, I mean, I am an absolute TikTok addict. And the amount of women over the age of 40, I think it's the fastest growing demographic on TikTok. They're hilarious on there, and you know it's you know they're really finding a place for themselves and a place where they're accepted for who they are, rather than the media manipulation of who they are. So you know if there was any place on this world where you were actually seeing the creativity of midlife women at the moment, it's on places like TikTok. So you know, now you put a team, and again, I remember once getting really upset because I didn't get a job because they were like, we wanted somebody that knows who all the YouTube influencers are. And at the time I was like, well, I've got a 14 and a 16-year-old daughter. It was like, you honestly don't think I know who Jake freaking Paul is? Come on, give me a break, you know? So, and again, you know, there's this perception of, well, you're this age, so you must be this, rather than, you know, and again, this perception of a 50-year-old woman, you don't actually automatically think that she's going to have teenage or young children. But again, women are having children later. So, you know, it's quite normal for a woman to have a child in her early 40s. So she's got a 10-year-old in her 50s, or she could be a grandmother. And you know, I hate demographics. I've hated them since they came in, and I watched them come in. Seriously, it was like you know, you actually saw the segmentation actually sort of happen and start happening in briefs and things like that. Whereas you know, I think we need attitude demographics. When we're selling things, I think we need to be starting to look at attitudes rather than ages and genders and all of that. So, yeah, I'm the big fan of multi-generational, multi-diverse, multiple voices, multiple stories. Is best for all of us.
So I think that's a really nice positive note to move on to some of the benefits of being a midlife creative or older. So I wanted to just say that some of the biggest icons of our time in kind of creativity, like Vera Wang didn't design her first dress until she was 40. J.R. Tolkien started writing Lord of the Rings at 45. Barbara Beskind, I think I'm saying that right, or Beskind, was still working for IDEO at 91 from her retirement home. So we asked on Instagram, who's the oldest person you've worked with? And the oldest answer that we got was 84, which I thought was really lovely. So I want to think about what's the perfect age to become a creative director? What's the sweet spot? A survey that we put out, we had 4% of people say 20s, 35% of people said 30s, 13% of people said 40, and 47.5% of people said that age is irrelevant. So looking at both of your careers, when were you doing your best work, and what age were you when you think you were doing your best work?
Okay. All right. So first of all, I've received ageism in the whole of my career. It's not something new. So I was 20 when I got my first job at Liga Stellani in 1982. So by the time, by the early 90s, I'd been working for 10 years. I was almost 30 and was so freaking ready to be a creative director. It was untrue. But unfortunately, the time I went and applied for a job, and they laughed in my face, like actually laughed in my face. So we got taken out. My creative director, my partner and I had won every single award known around the world, and went to lunch with our headhunter thinking, great, here comes the money bags, here comes all the offers, and was basically greeted with, sorry girls, the guys have decided there'll never be a female creative director in Sydney, so you might as well give up now. So that was the point that I set up my own agency. So I was 35 when I gave myself the title of creative director. It would have been absolutely the perfect time, would have been, absolutely amazing if I hadn't really, really, really wanted to start my greatest creative project of my life and have 2 children. I now find myself at 61 years old. And again, there were very few creative women when I started. There's certainly very few creative women at my stage of my career. And I'm going to say that post-menopause is the most incredible, inspiring, powerful time I have ever had in my life. I remember waking up one morning after menopause going, holy shit. This is what David Droga felt like at 25. You get a boost of confidence, you get a boost of inspiration, you've added with the no fucks left to give. It's time to be an absolute creative freaking powerhouse. It really is. So I would say 60.
60. Okay, I'll take that. Michael, what about you? When are you doing your best work? I hate to insinuate it's not now.
Don't worry, I did flag that, but I'm not going to rise to it. Gosh. Okay, so I suppose I had my first attempt to be at least a proper leader of a team of people in my 20s, and they all left the team. And so I think I took that as A, because I did all the work. B, I didn't think they were very good. C, I was clearly not creative director material at the time because I wanted to do all the work. I was still doing that thing that you do when you're in your 20s where you think, I can do that. I think it took me a while to get any good at directing people, and I'm still arguably a bit shit at it because I still roll up my sleeves and do some of the work. So I guess in my late 30s and 40s, I started to get better at working out how to work with other people, not piss them off as much, encourage them to develop an idea, i.e. what good creatives are meant to do. I still fail demonstrably at that by going off and sitting on the kitchen table and still having a go on a Sunday afternoon, which pisses off people to the max. If you imagine you come back on a Monday morning and, I used to tell this famous story about Woody Purtle, the Pentagram partner, who would just come back on a Monday morning with pages and pages of scribbles. But I guess that's kind of the person I am. To your implied question, though, Katie, I have felt slightly more mortal the last few years. Yeah, I don't think I can do 6.5-day weeks anymore, which I used to. Used to take Saturday morning off and then go back to work. I first met my wife. That's what she met, and I think she thought, "What the heck is this?" No wonder it took us 5-6 years to get actually married because she never saw me. I only had Saturday mornings off. But I think in my later 50s, I'm starting to slow down a little. So if we apply it backwards, then probably 30s and 40s. But I think it's about mindset, isn't it? Because some people, I met Droga when he was just started his first job. I was his art director in Sydney, and he was something like 19. It's to do with mindset, really. And if the real question about a creative director is, the best creative directors are not like me. They actually are really good at stepping back and getting great work out of people and not really doing the work themselves. So I'm not sure I've ever really been very good at that. No, I'm serious, because it's a real skill.
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
I would classify someone like Michael Wolff. I looked it up. Michael Wolff is now in his 90s. Someone like Michael Wolff is really good at having ideas and then finding other people to do the do. And that's a genuine skill. And it takes a really long time to find out how to do that. And I'm not sure I've ever been very good at that, if I'm honest.
Yeah. So I think it feels like, and this is to be very generic, the big difference between being a creative in your 20s and your 50s is maybe ego versus experience. I saw this really lovely quote by Anne Rothenstein. It said, "I think the young have incredible daring creativity because they think they're the greatest people in the world." So I guess it's this question of, when were you doing your best work versus when were you the nicest person to work with and the most well-rounded, and when does experience become more valuable than that huge ego?
I guess if you draw a diagram of what you just verbally described, the two curves go across each other, don't they? Your ego, but usually is more tempered as you get older, as your experience goes. So there's probably that sweet spot, isn't there, where they cross? Yeah, because there's no doubt that you think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread when you're 28, but actually, in my case, all the work I did for 5 years was all dreadful. You know, at the beginning of my company, I can't speak for Jane. She was what did you say, Ligas Delaney at 20?
Yeah, age 2.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So,
She was doing her best work then.
I'm firmly of the belief that there are early starters and late bloomers. I don't think that there is a progression to great creativity. I think there are people that are great when they were young but burn out. I think there are people that gradually get better and better and better. And, you know, and I think particularly for women, I think there are women when once they get rid of all the biological stuff and all the, you know, child rearing stuff, that's the time when they become really creative and amazing. And and I'm not just saying this from me. Somebody the other day was asking me why I don't date, and I was like, because in the last 5 years I've met so many remarkable women, and whenever I meet a man, I'm just sort of like, oh. And it was like, because they don't seem to have ever overcome anything. They've achieved a lot of things, but it's like what you overcome that makes you who you are and makes you an interesting person, makes you fascinating, makes you different. And so, you know, I think I don't think you can sort of say there is a time when you are most creative. You know, it's like, you know, I look at my daughters now, and, you know, one's a photographer and the other's a musician. And, you know, they're doing it. I mean, I'm blown away by the stuff that they do. But it's very different from what I do, and that's fine. It was like we're all creative in our own ways. It's like, you know, it's not a competition. It's like creativity is about expressing who you are. And that's also expressing who you are at which stage of life you're at.
I think that there's this really interesting notion that what is the perfect age, right, for all these achievements and this progression. And life is a progression. You know, we are all on a conveyor belt of some style. But ageism is something that actually happens to a lot of people when they're quite young, and maybe find it really difficult to kind of diagnose that that's what's happening. So we actually heard this a lot. I put out some questions about, have you ever experienced or encountered any ageism? And we had a lot of people, probably 50% of people, come back saying, yes, I've been told I'm too young, too inexperienced. So just wanted to read out one of those stories, and they'd like to remain anonymous. They landed a junior role where they worked really hard for a few years, fully understood the business and the processes, built really great relationships there. When the time came for their boss to retire, they were promoted into that role. Having already been leading many projects for a while prior to the promotion, they felt very ready to step up. But from then on, with that role change, they constantly had comments from people outside of the company that came across as questioning whether they were old enough to be in that particular role, often in disbelief that they'd grown into a lead role so early in their career. and then like kind of backhanded, questions that have a slight kind of undertone. Wait, when did you graduate again? So is this your first proper job? And it kind of said that these questions seem really innocent on the surface, but said in a way that felt really patronising. And then they went on to say that experience and ability should play the main part in whether someone is suitable for a particular role. Those two things are often paired with years in the industry, which isn't always the case. As long as people are meeting and exceeding expectations, why does it matter how old they are? So you've both spoken a little bit about what it was like coming into the industry and being younger, but I wanted instead to ask you, how do you feel when you meet young creative directors? If you're pitching against another agency or you're on a project team and some 23-year-old comes slamming in, all bells and whistles, do you feel a kind of way? Do you ever think to yourself, oh, they look like they've only just graduated?
I guess I've got actual real experience of this. So in 1995, the female creators in Australia were the most successful they had ever been. We actually won every single award known to mankind. It was like a golden year for female women. The next year, there was a spate of 20 and 21-year-old male creative directors. It was like a whole generation of female creatives were just wiped out for the David Drogers, for the Simon Reynolds. And it was really interesting because I was actually out to lunch with one of them. I'm still friends with them. I don't blame them at all. And he was like, oh my God, Jane, when I took that job, that creative director's job when I was 25, he was like, I was fucking terrified. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And he just all of a sudden saw the look on my face. I mean, there were practically tears in my eyes because I was like, I was 30 then. I was so ready for that job and nobody would even dream of giving it to me. And so there has been a history of promoting people to the role of creative director when they're not ready for it. And it actually doesn't do them any favours at all. Now, I'm not saying that the person that sent this letter it sounds as though they've been readied for this position and, it was, they earned it and the person that gave it to them obviously believed that they deserved it and they can do it. But I think there's been so many instances of the person with the biggest ego getting the job at an age and at a point where they're not capable of doing it, that people are going to be looking at young people in higher jobs going, did you actually get there genuinely, or have you been fast-tracked, and is that actually the best thing for you?
I mean, my feeling about the question is that if someone's ready to do it, then I think that the age is irrelevant, if I'm brutally honest. I think that, well, I just touched on it, didn't I? I think when I tried to be a creative director in my 20s, I was just still busy trying to be a designer, and so was a terrible creative director. I wasn't ready. And so it sounds terrible what the person who's written to you is going through, because if they has been deemed to be ready for the role, then it's pretty awful that other people are questioning that. And I kind of feel for said person a bit, really.
But it's again these perceptions that we have that there is an ideal time for anything. So for a young person, if seriously, if somebody gave me a job as an ECD in an advertising agency tomorrow, the outcry would be horrendous. It was like, you can't, because we've got to smash these stereotypes of when is the right time and who is the right person. We've actually got to sort of look at talent really individually, and and not go by this herd mentality of, well, creative directors are supposed to be, this age and doing this.
But then, yes, I absolutely agree. But going back to Katie's question, there's an undeniable chutzpah about the 32-year-old who is absolutely in the right place, in the right job, and is firing. Okay. And to back to your question, Katie, if you're in a creative pitch or a strategic pitch against a team of those when you're in your late 50s, that's pretty tough. Yeah, because if the client is minded to want the 32-year-old stars, then you're in trouble at this age. You are in trouble. Now,
Yeah.
of course, when you're 32, you don't think what it's going to be like when you're 25 years older. You think, well, fuck him, he's too old. You know, we want the job, he's too old. You know, and we're talking about the inherent biases in the industry, but the industry, to Jane's point, is self-perpetuating that.
Yeah, absolutely.
In many respects, but you can't stop the 32-year-old doing what they do, yeah, because they, by definition, are you could argue at the height of their powers. They're going for it, and their mission, if you like, is kind of Darwinian, which is to kill the 59-year-old, yeah, and that's tough, yeah, and yeah, okay, maybe once or twice a year we lose that, and you can't play the grey hair card. I mean, you can play it a bit, but you can't play it in every meeting, you know, and you kind of know. You think, I'm not going to get this, I'm too old. And that, it happens. I wish it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it happened, you know.
I think I wanted to ask a kind of pointed question, specifically when it comes to you running the studio now, Michael. If you had put a job ad out for a creative director, or a design director, would you be expecting someone with a certain amount of years experience? Because it's a really quick, easy indicator of how well-rounded a person's going to be, right? How long they've been in jobs. Or I guess my question is, it's easy to say that age is irrelevant, but in practice, how easy is that to apply?
It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's a good question, yeah.
One of the things that I found was people were like, yeah, you're really cool, Jane. You're not old, but your work is. And it was like, well, it's been 20 years since I've had a budget. You know, it's like, you can't expect me to have a modern, you know, can't you look at that and see how radical that was at the time? And it was like, well, I suppose if you weren't there, you couldn't see how radical it was at the time. But if I was advertising for a creative director, I would actually be looking, well, first of all, who the person is. You know, the personality is absolutely the most important. But also, what is it that makes you remarkable? What is it that is, you know, it doesn't need to be a massive body of work. If somebody could have done something that was just absolutely amazing in their first year in advertising, you know, so... but also somebody might not have done something for 20 years, but bloody hell, that was amazing 20 years ago. What would they do with the brief right now? So I think that one of the problems I have with advertising at the moment is everybody wants to see what you've done before. And that to me just drives me nuts, because it was like, well, can't you see what I see of what's coming? And it was like, you know, and you know, we used to be able to scribble things out and describe things, but now everybody wants to see what it is. They want to see proof of what it is. And, you know, again, you know, I got stuck doing beer for 10 years. I wish I'd known the three rule, because I went on and did 18.
Yeah, do it 3 times and stop. Yeah, you should have stopped.
I should have stopped at 3. I went and did 18. I was like so damn bored. I moved countries to get away from it because I'd become so niche. But that was the way that the industry was leading everybody, was to sort of get in your niche and, oh, she's known for this and they're known for this and they're known for that. And I don't think people look at talent enough of what their potential is versus what they've actually done.
I mean, I think to your question, Katie, we would absolutely not put an ad out that specified an age, no. Which is kind of what you're asking, I think. Of course, implicit with a design director or a creative director role at a little company like this is that you have been doing it a while. I mean, I'd like to think that, you know, someone could do it after a few years, but I suspect that would be very difficult. You know, even within, you know, like if you say that 4 or 5 designers downstairs in their 20s and early 30s, and, you know, I think the mechanics of saying, look, here comes person X, they're 24, but they're great, and they're going to be your boss, then whoa, that's tricky. So I'm imagining at your age, 31, that when you're working with other companies or freelancing, what have you, most of the creative directors are that little bit older than you. What'll be interesting, I think, probably read this conversation is if you stay freelance, as I think you currently are, or doing your own thing, as the creative directors start to get younger than you, that might be an interesting kind of dynamic. And I think that's really what this conversation is all about. Why can't people keep designing properly into their 40s? If, though, I put an ad out this afternoon for a creative director at Johnson Banks, I'd get very few applicants in their 40s. And I don't really know why that is.
Yeah.
Maybe they think, oh, I'm not going to do that. I might get 2 out of 200. You know, and it comes back to the questions we were asking, 50 minutes ago. Where do these people go?
Yeah.
You know, where have they gone? What happened?
Yeah.
To drive them out of the industry. And I think all of the things we've been talking about are kind of driving people out. Inherent ageism, burnout, all of these things make it very difficult.
But also the requirement for what have you done recently?
Yeah.
What have you done in the last 2 years? I mean, God almighty, it was like, you could have won every award on the planet, but what did you do last year? And, again, that's not looking at the potential of people. It's like everybody's like looking for the proof of somebody. Nobody takes a risk on anymore. And it was like in the early 80s in London. I mean, everybody was given a chance, everybody was given freedom. Everything's getting too regimented and risk averse. So we must have the people that have got the right experience. How many, you get a brief now and it was like, give us examples of, have you worked on banking before? Have you worked on this before? Have you worked on that before? And it was like, people ask for examples of my work, and I'm like, if I kept every single piece of work that I had done since 1982, I'd need a moving van just to keep it all.
It's a big folio.
It's a big portfolio and you only keep the cherry pick stuff. You only keep the stuff that you're really proud of. So to then sort of, and again, it's easier in the digital age. But it was like actually going and finding or keeping that material to be able to go, hey, yeah, I've got experience in this, and yes, I've got experience in this, and this is what I did in cars, and this is what I did in this, rather than being able to look at somebody as they're a creative person who answers creative problems and creates incredible executions. It's everybody's being forced to be niche.
I think there's a broader question here, though, which is that we are in a slightly risk-averse climate, and people want to see that someone has done. I kind of understand it. It's massively frustrating. The equivalent for us is when someone asks for a big tender, which we have to go through these tender applications, and if you haven't done, let's say you want to do a museum or a gallery, which we would love to do, and we've done lots of museums or galleries, but they haven't all been in the last 5 years or 3 years. And the tender will say, you can only tell us about projects you've done in the last 3 years. And so that's the equivalent, really, of what Jane is saying, is we might have done, as we have done, La Villette, the Science Museum, V&A, but that's over a 30-year period. So it's because people are really, really worried the clients need to see that someone's done X amount of beer ads or X amount of royal associations, in my case. So maybe what will happen next is we'll stop being a little bit quite so risk averse, and maybe the economy will recover. And maybe there'll be a change of government. And maybe things will loosen up a little, because we are in, and I think it's worthwhile saying, and I know that the economy is not great and things feel like they're in stasis. So, but if I was client side, you sort of understand it, wouldn't you? If you were a client, do you take that punt?
Absolutely.
It's tricky, isn't it?
And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to talk a little bit about clients and how clients are choosing their creative teams. Do they care? Essentially, right, about the age of their creative teams. And there's this amazing essay by Olivia Stubbings, which we'll reference in the episode notes. We're going to have a lot of references in this one, so make sure you head down to click on them all. And it's called Harnessing the Power of the Late Radicals. It's quite long, but it's worthwhile, so I'm just going to read it out. So many of the new problems we face are the same as the old ones, only in a new guise. For younger people, this may be the first time they are tackling these briefs, but older practitioners have the experience and muscle memory to spot commonalities and apply lessons from the past to the current situation. Without them, we get stuck in Groundhog Day. The result? The industry answers these problems with inexperience, using shiny new innovations, not to be missed opportunities, must be jumped on bandwagons. These innovations eventually emerge as a false dawn. By failing to learn from experience, we're continually setting ourselves up to fail. the average age of the FTSE 100 boards steadily rise. The average age of the non-executive directors sits at 59.6, while executive directors are 52.8. Advertising is looking increasingly inexperienced. Empirical evidence shows that many board members already view advertising as trivial. We perpetuate this by trumpeting and trivialising every new initiative as a revolution. This undermines our credibility with the board, the gatekeepers of the Gestalt brand. So I thought that was super interesting, this idea that actually clients might be looking for experience experience in their creative teams that maybe reflects the makeup of their business.
Yeah, and I think that's where we came in, isn't it? You know, if you're going to... It takes a brave client, though, yeah, to do that, to say, look, no, we don't want, no disrespect, the 30-year-old, 1-year-old whiz and spin. We want the older voices, we want the sage, we want the people with experience, people who've done 17 beer ads.
Yeah.
Brands from beginning to end.
Yeah, but that's a brave thing to do, yeah, because they are being pummeled by their marketing team, who by definition are probably 10 to 15 years younger, who are saying, no, we need to be on it, we need it to whiz and spin, because that's where the market is. So that's a great thing to aspire to, and it comes back to my baby boomer point, doesn't it, really? And maybe increasingly we will see that. But just at the moment, that's a tough call for a board to make, because they'll be presented all of these numbers where their marketing team will say, yes, you don't know what you're talking about because you're 59.6 years old, and you know our key demographic is this. So, yeah, it's a great aspiration. Yes.
Yeah. And you know. Look, I had a brand I had been speaking to for 2 years, going, please, your product is for midlife women. Please, you know, bring us in. We've been speaking to their agencies. It was like, please, bring us in. Finally get the phone call one day. It's like, yes, finally we're getting to work on the brand. We get into the meeting, and they put this young, I feel very sorry for her still. If I ever see her, I will apologise profusely. But this very, very young creative basically gets on the call, or you know, the whole account team's there, gets on the call and starts presenting her idea to me. And I rang my business partner afterwards, and I sort of said, sorry, Jackie, but I just told a client to fuck off. And she was like, oh God, what happened? And I went, you know, they didn't come in and ask us. This was something specific. This was menopause. So it was like something that, you know, we have direct experience of. They didn't bring us a strategy stage. They came in and asked us to check their work. And I just sort of said, you know, if there had been a creative team that was doing a product for the black market, who didn't have a single black person on the team, would they have the guts to ring up a black woman and ask her what she thought of the ideas? And it was like, this is exactly the same thing. It was like, you know, they were like, so, you know, what do you think? And I'm like, sink or swim. You know, that's what you believe. That's your insights. If that's what you know, I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've got to get to a point where there's respect and multiple generation. Yeah.
I love that new business approach though, Jane. I think that's very powerful. Telling people to fuck off. I don't think I've ever done that actually. I think people might tell me
still
that
time.
I'm a bit dodgy, but that's a great one. I've obviously wanted to say it many times. Never quite got that.
I'm aware that we've been chatting for a little while, so I've got just a couple more questions, if that's all right, before we round up. This is a little bit of a personal one for me, actually. Are elder creatives jaded, a bit pessimistic? They talk about, back in my day, we had to work all hours, we had to sort all the books into colour order. Oh, I was here when they launched Quark. And they perpetuate the generation gap, right? By constantly talking about their experience versus your experience that you're having right now. And they do so in a way that is a little bit patronising, to be honest. So do you think that actually older creatives can be part of the problem?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah. gosh.
Older white male creatives, can I also please add to that?
Thanks for
Because
that,
I don't think I've ever heard that levelled from a woman. Look, this has been my bugbear with the old guys. They've been as much of a problem for us as anybody. And again, it comes down to you've never faced an ism in your life, and now all of a sudden you're facing an ism, and you've got nowhere, and your first reaction is to be ageist. So you have no understanding whatsoever. And, I sort of say to them very tongue-in-cheek, in this one, guys, ladies first, open the door, ladies first. We've already dealt with isms. We know how to deal with it. And we know how to deal with this one. We'll fix this for everybody. But, this constantly moaning isn't as good as it was in the 80s. I was there in the 80s. There were some things that were absolutely fucking amazing about the 80s that have been lost to this industry, and I cry for it as much as the old white guys do. But also, I know how hard it was. I know how it was only them. I know how much of a boys' club it was. I know how, and I know how their arrogance, trumped absolutely everything. So, and so to carry on that arrogance of, we're the kings of the universe, again, you've got to look at a different time. In the 80s, I mean, Margaret Thatcher was famous of coming out from Saatchi's and Saatchi's when they presented Labour's Not Working, asking why are the smartest people in England selling soup? She couldn't understand how these brilliant people in advertising were doing this. Now, we've got to be realistic in this industry. Those people now are in tech. It's like, the people that wanted to change the world, the people that were truly creative are, the best of the best are in tech. And so, they're not the kings of the universe anymore. And, it's a much friendlier, more conducive and a nicer place to work than it was in the 80s. It was horrible back then, horrible.
Yeah. I think the attitude of well, I was just thinking back to the fact that in the late 80s I worked with a team of designers who'd sort of who'd had their first flush of success in the 70s, and they would constantly talk in the late 80s about how great the 70s was. So I think it's hardwired in every creative to look back to 15 or 20 years before and say how much better it was, even though it often wasn't. So I think those people who continually talking about the past and who you're alluding to, Katie, I'm kind of intrigued to know who they are. But anyway,
I'll tell you off air.
You can tell me offline. But I think those are the people who are not going to handle getting older gracefully. Because if they're continually harking back to Quark Express or whatever, freehand, I don't know, some amazing product that no one's ever heard of, then that's not great because they're not going to adjust with the times. And one of the implicit skills of being a creative who ages gracefully and is to be malleable, is to be able to move with the times, is to be able to adapt and update themselves and reboot your hard drive every now and again. And you do have to do that, because if you just sit in a corner and grumble and say, back in my day we'd do type with a layout pen. Yes, we did, and it, in some respects it was amazing, but it did take me 3 months just to design a brochure. And I'm not joking, because I would have to do every fucking piece of type, So I'm massively grateful to the fact that life has moved on most of the time.
Look, they say that the future of careers is lifelong learning and multiple careers, and and again, I think when people are going, Quark Express, it was what they're really saying is fucking hell, I had to learn Quark Express. Now what have I got to learn? And I do think that particularly with AI and things coming in, I do sort of get a sense of, oh God, what else have I got to learn? I learned Photoshop, now I've got to learn, and so, but again, that is an attitude change that needs to happen with all of us, is that, Singapore have just announced that they're giving grants for people over the age of 40 to go back to university, because they're saying that everything that they learnt at university is absolutely useless now. And so, their way of looking at what's happening in the future is okay, at 40, you do university at 20, you then go and do it again in your 40s, because, the world is moving so fast that's how you're going to, again, carry on for these long careers that we need to be starting to design for.
Yeah, brilliant answers. Thanks both. So finally, and I know this is going to be impossible given how in-depth and complex this topic is, the reason I'm going to ask you both to kind of summarise a little bit of advice for someone who might be listening who finds himself in midlife and might be facing some of these issues is because we had one anonymous suggestion which cracked us both up so much. Someone just said, I took 15 years off my resume and took the dates off my degree several years ago when I was looking for work, and it worked a treat. So their approach is to essentially completely erase age from their kind of job application. So I guess if you had a little bit, that might not be your advice, and I'm definitely not saying that everyone should do that. But if you had a little bit of advice for someone who's in midlife and might be feeling either like they're being pushed out or feeling like they've lost their mojo, what would that be?
Okay, so I was told by a headhunter when I was... So in 2015, the stat came out that only 3% of the world's creative directors were female. So I was like, you know what, I've got to get back in, time to jump back in. And a headhunter who'd known me for years was like, Jane, if you want to get back in, you've got to take 10 years off your CV and get a facelift. That was from
that's
a headhunter.
That's not your advice, though, just to clarify, Jane.
That was the advice that I was given. No, I have every single experience on there. I proudly started in 1982, and I have proudly been in the industry since. And, you know, again, I think we shouldn't be lying about our age. The reason why we are invisible is because even we deny our own existence.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
I think in my case, I mean, I do sometimes get applications from more mature designers, okay? And in direct response to your request, Katie, I think that I would advise these people, that person, to have a kind of hard look at what they are sending to people. So in my case, as a designer, I get sent a lot of PDFs, yeah? And so I get a lot of PDFs from students, and they're full out, 16 to 9, and they're lively, and they're bright, and they're colourful, and they're demonstrating all these skills and techniques. Now, generally what happens with a more mature designer is they will send me a portrait PDF and all the colours are in CMYK and it will look a little dull. Now, it's not a difficult task to reorientate your portfolio. It's not difficult to design your 20-page PDF landscape, not portrait. It's not difficult to change the colours from CMYK to RGB. I'm not talking about utterly reinventing your work, but I guess what I'm talking about is being aware of the fact that if you are presenting yourself as a little bit out of touch, then the danger is that someone will look at that and think, well, this person's a bit out of touch.
Yeah.
But you can represent your work, and maybe if you're looking at something that you designed 15 years ago and you think, oh, well, the idea is great, but actually I wouldn't use that typeface anymore, well, redo it. You know, that's what I say to designers all the time, irrespective of their age. The classic is when someone leaves college and say, oh, I wouldn't do it like this anymore. I say, well, redo it. Just reboot. And it's not that difficult, yeah? It's really not that tricky to refresh and reboot your work if you feel that it's not quite as, I don't know, edgy as youthful or whatever. I mean, all I've talked about is changing the colour values in the PDF. And then instantly things will look different. So there are easy wins here for the person who made that request, you know.
Yeah.
But don't send a portrait PDF with dull CMYK 1996 colours. That's my biggest tip I could give anyone, really.
Just have one final question for you both, which is a bit cheeky, actually. When are you going to retire? Are you going to retire? What are you going to do? What is the new retirement age? And do you have a plan?
I kind of anticipated this question. I looked it up, actually, that one of my favourite ever graphic designers, Alan Fletcher, he worked with his friends in the 60s at a company called Fletcher Forbes Gill, but it wasn't until 1970, when he was 40, that Pentagram started. So he was 40 when he becomes a partner in what is arguably one of the most famous design companies ever. And then he left 22 years later, okay? And then he worked on his own from his Muse house in Kensington for another 12 years until the end of his life. So that struck me as quite a good way to work, really. He was part of a big company, and then he left it, and then he worked for himself. And as his retrospective at the Design Museum opened, sadly he died, but he kind of went out on an incredible high. And I must admit that working away until I die it's probably quite feasible for me. I know that sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I just don't know if I can, in 5 years' time, just put my feet up and not do this anymore. I seem to be hardwired to do this forever. Trouble is, I'll say that, and then I'll be hit by a bus tomorrow, and that'll be it, won't it? But hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Definitely not before I'm 70. There's absolutely no way. I'm a single mum, so every single penny I've earned I've spent on raising my kids. So the last 10 years of my career are trying to get enough money to be able to retire. But even beyond that, I don't think I ever will retire. I mean, it was like I always use my brain. I will always be writing. It was like I might not be, working for clients or doing something like that, but I'll be writing, I'll be designing, I'll be painting, I'll be, So no, I tend to carry on going till the day they take me out.
So it's kind of optimistic in a sense that both of you love what you do so much that you want to do it forever, but then also for someone who's my age, saying that you both want to work until you pop your clogs is a little amazing.
I think that might be the way that we have been grown up to think about how that we would work until we fell over. And I completely understand how at 31, Katie, you would listen to those answers and think, oh my God. And I think what the biggest, I think what the big change here is that your generation quite rightly are questioning all of these assumptions, are quite rightly thinking, why does Michael still work 6.5 days a week? Why should I do that for another 30 or 40 years? And I think that's completely valid because we were in this kind of Protestant work ethic, must keep going, must do thing that has, in many respects, caused 1,000,001 problems, not just for what we've been talking today, but on the other things you've been talking about on your other podcasts. We're to blame. The boomers are to blame for many of these problems. Yeah. Now we have to work until we die,
It's a great bit of trailer there. The boomers are to blame, and now we have to work until we die.
I think the thing is that for me, I think it's a bit different. Somebody sent a poem the other day, which I just thought was, and it was like, there's no stopping her. And then it was like, but she does stop. She stops often. I've seen her stop. And I think, my career has certainly never been full pelt all the way. But when it's a case of, I don't think I could turn my brain off. I don't think I could turn my creativity off. It was like, it's not about like having to work or feeling as though I should be working. It was like, I just can't imagine a life where I don't have a thought and want to write a blog on it, or I can't see something beautiful and want to make a film of it or take a photograph of it, or, so I just I can't see how I could ever turn that part of me off.
Yeah. Amazing. This has been such a great conversation, and I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of opinions about what we've talked about today, which is good, and we really welcome them. So make sure, if you're still with us listening, send them in. And just from me, a massive thank you to you both for your time and for agreeing to chat with us today.
A pleasure.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you, Michael, and lovely to meet you all. It's been great.
Cheers.